4 years ago, Anastasia Lin, a Chinese-Canadian actress, was meant to represent Canada at Miss World 2015, the pageant in China. But China refused to let her in because Lin was also a campaigner for human rights and a member of Falun Gong, the spiritual movement China has banned. China also threatened her father, still living over there. Anastasia Lin is at the moment in Australia working for the Centre for Independent Studies. I spoke to her a short while ago. Anastasia Lin, thank you so much for joining me. China's now charged Hung Henzhong with espionage, which seems trumped up. What does this tell us about the Chinese regime?
So Dr. Yang was arrested 7 months ago, and he's been kept in pretty much a secret location, and no one knows how he's doing. Apparently, there had been consular visits, but he was never been officially charged. Now, this kind of arrest of foreign citizens happens in China a lot, and mostly is politically motivated. For example, 2 Canadian citizens have been arrested recently, last year, because of the arrest of Meng Wanzhou, the CFO of Huawei. And that was in retaliation to Canada's action to obey international law and arresting Meng Wanzhou on U.S. request. So the Canadian citizens were arrested, and now they're still not released. And I believe that for Dr. Yang's case, it's because he has been speaking consistently about China's human rights abuses, democratic process, and that's the reason why he was arrested in China.
Now, in Australia, there are 1.2 million people of Chinese descent. There are many, many people with dual nationality, and there's also the Chinese students studying here. This will be of dramatic interest to them, won't it? Because we've already heard of people who speak up here against China, having their relatives in China threatened or warned. That happened to you as well, didn't it?
Yes, it happened to me. And I think it's in moments like this that one of your own, an Australian citizen, is arrested in China, that the Australian government should definitely speak up firmly about what we believe in and why China is wrong in this case. Because otherwise, what kind of message does that send to ordinary Australian Chinese people who live in Australia and constantly live in fear that they don't dare to speak up their mind because Chinese overseas informants are watching, and that they might end up being the same as Dr. Yang when they go back to China, and the Australian government is not going to speak up for them at that moment. So we need to show the Australian Chinese people who are here that we will protect them as well.
But is that what do you think this arrest? I mean, the idea that he's a spy seems to me absolutely preposterous. Do you think that is what this arrest is really about, an arrest like it, an attempt to frighten the Chinese diaspora into shutting up about China, or else they will face arrest if they go back to China, or their relatives will face harassment?
That is exactly what that is. So these charges on espionage, on destabilizing Chinese society, this is the typical nominal charges that Chinese Communist government giving to foreign citizens when they need a political reason to, any kind of reason to arrest. And it's really troubling because we are seeing these pro-Beijing protesters on the street harassing the pro-Hong Kong protesters in our campuses, on our street. And some of them would take videos of themselves and upload them on Chinese Weibo, which is the Chinese Facebook, in some way to sort of act externally to show the Chinese government, this is what we're doing outside. See how patriotic we are. And that is sort of a way for them to even, when they go back to China, to advance and to secure their positions. And that is really unhealthy for Chinese Australians to think that they need to act externally to show to the Chinese government how they're behaving here.
Anastasia, so far, the Australian government has said, look, it's offering maximum consular support. I think the toughest statement I've heard so far is from the Foreign Minister saying if Dr. Huang is being arrested for his political views, then he should be released. That's about as strong as they'll go. The theory being that the more you stir the Chinese panda, the more it might turn on you. Do you think that's right? Do you think that's the way to go? Speak softly when it comes to China and you're more likely to get your way?
Well, I think experience speaks otherwise. In the past, the Canadian government had been successfully rescuing Canadian political prisoner from China, and that was through consistent effort of speaking publicly and confronting what Chinese Communist Party are doing. That is the only way to show them that we'll stand with our value. This is the way that we live. This is our philosophy. This is the values that animate our own society, and we're not going to give it up. Unless they are very clear about that, they're going to think that they can bully us, they can push us all the way. And I think in the past that this kind of measured, closed-door diplomatic talk had been the approach of the Western countries for so long. And we've been waiting for this magical change that Chinese government maybe one day will discover its conscience and being converted into our value system. But I think in the past few decades, we see the opposite happening. It's us, the Western countries, that have been giving up our value. And it's Beijing who have been using their soft power to coerce foreign government to silence on China's human rights issue. It's been put into practice, and it's proven that it has failed. So let's try something else. How about for once that we speak up for our own citizens and see how Chinese government react?
Look, under President Xi Jinping, there's absolutely no doubt that what you've said is absolutely correct, that China's regime has grown more authoritarian, not more democratic. But there's one other factor, of course. China is a huge market. It's our biggest market. At the top of the show, I've suggested that this is a choice that we face between standing up for freedom or protecting our cash, our trade with China. Is that how you see it? And should we perhaps be more inspired by the example that we see in Hong Kong of people that are putting really their own freedom on the line to preserve it?
Well, trading with China, I think anybody who had experience with dealing with China in the business sense would know that this is an asymmetrical trade relationship. Since China joined the WTO, they have been breaking every one of the promise before, and they have not removed any of the things, non-trade, non-tariff barriers, and they are still continue to manipulate their own currency. And to gain advantage on the international stage, they're still stealing our technology. They did not keep up to any of the promises. And they have gained control of critical assets in Australia. But Australia is not able to do the same. Now, Hong Kong people are putting their lives on the line because they know that they're defending their way of life, their freedom, against the totalitarian regime that is fundamentally against those things. And once those freedom is lost, they'll never be able to get it back. And that's why they're putting everything on the line to do that. And I think we can take inspiration from what Hong Kong people are doing. They're protesting, they're putting their life on the line. And so far, it's been so inspiring for the world to watch. And it's so inspiring for Chinese people to watch. And the Communist government, they do care about what the outside world thinks. We have way more leverage than we know. They care about what Western governments think about them because they need us more than we need them. They need to trade more than we need them, collectively.
Anastasia Lin, may I again thank you. You've been on the show before, and I said it then, I'll say it again. I think you're a tremendously brave and articulate spokesman for the case for democracy when we're facing China, the case for standing up for freedom, because this is probably the civilizational challenge of our time. And it's not Chinese versus non-Chinese. It's people who fight for freedom against the forces of tyranny that tyrannize right now 1 billion Chinese people. Thank you so much for being so brave.
Thank you, Andrew.